to the first 90 plus 9. All right, so first 90 seconds, what are we going to do in this tutorial? We're going to talk about how my rig is built at a very high level and then go over some of the features. So it is at a very high level. It is a Dikko rig with some Royal Skies LLC extensions on the knees and elbows, and perhaps a little bit in the shoulders. Just in general, we're learning their stuff. So if you want to catch up to where we are going to be doing this reading series, you want to watch every tutorial Dikko, D-I-K-K-O, and every tutorial that Royal Skies LLC have done on YouTube. And then once you're done with that, you'll be able to understand my extensions, my shoulder rig, my hip rig, and my elbow and knee rig are a little bit extra and special. Also, I guess my face rig. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now that'd be our first 90-second intro. Now let's go into the 90 minutes detailed of what we're talking about. So this rig, let's look at what it looks like in the particulars. So this, I really like the way this elbow looks. This is it bent. We'll look at it straight here in a second. The shoulders, this is the kind of deform we want. We want to be able to get into these poses without doing anything special with tweet bones. This particular pose, we don't see anything too special about the hips, but we want the hips to be able to do splits. We want them to be able to do crossed legs. We want them to be able to, her to be able to curl up into a fetal position, and the hips all look good. These knees are somewhat brand new for my rig. They also look pretty amazing in most of the deforms. The ankles actually have a little bit of something. We're going to talk about the Achilles tendon, and we're going to talk about how all the bones work. So let's actually start at the top and move our way down. So at the top, we have a controller for her head, which lets us move that around, and you can twist it, and when she does, the neck muscles, I forgot the actual technical name, will move along in a reasonable sort of way. And then also you can kind of stretch and move her neck around into impossible positions, but that's important for like when she looks up, she's going to of course be moving her neck back. So we want to be able to do that. And actually, let's stay in that pose. That's going to be an important pose for seeing some other things. So we want to be able to have her look around. When she does look around, you can see her eyelids move a little bit along with it. That's a pretty common thing to have in the rig. There are some meta controllers, I call them. They're controllers that control a bunch of other things. So for her eyes, you can make them really wide. You can make them really narrow, left and right. And then also those control the highlights in her eyes. This controller, where she looks around, you can actually move one eye independently, or you can take her eyes and make the pupils small or big. Let's take a look at that up close. So this is something we want to be able to do. Her eye brows also need to be able to move in different ways depending on where that controller is. So continuing our way down her body, there's a meta controller for her mouth to do a bunch of things at once. Then there are also some more kind of meta controllers that move all of her mouth, but in a more very direct way. Then this one will move her mouth around along with her nose. Her nose, of course, has its own controller to move independently. If you don't want to move her various space bits with that, what I'm calling meta controller, you can control things directly. Like you can grab, say, her top eyelid on her left eye and move it around, or both eyelids at the same time, or grab the bottom eyelid and move it up, and such things like that. You can then also do such things with her mouth. Maybe you just want to control her, the outer part of her lips and get her into some particular pose, right? So that will take care of most of the face rig, but also in the face rig, of course, you gotta have the tongue, right? Tongue needs to be able to be moved and scaled. So sometimes tongues can be a little bit bigger, sometimes they can be a little bit smaller. The teeth, nothing special about teeth, right? But her jaw can be controlled independently of the rest of her face, so that way she can do chewing motions that sometimes people want. Continuing to move down the rig, there is to control her arms and elbows, you've got the clavicle, which does most of the shoulder motion, and that should have a fairly large amount of motion. Notice that also pulls her pectoral and her breasts and her back muscles all move along with that. We'll be talking about that at some point. You can, if you put the rotation in active element mode, then you can grab her hand controller, then her shoulder controller, and you can kind of get a little bit of an FK sort of motion with that, rotating from her shoulder. Here, let's rotate on the Z-axis, for example. This control right in her shoulder is the parent of her pull target for her elbow, so that's what you can use to point her elbow in various places, but it's doubles as the thing to get that fake FK. So then another thing is you can use this bone in her elbow here if you want to do fake FK from her elbow instead of from her shoulder. Then we've got in her hands, we'll kind of stick to this upper body area here. There's this meta controller to control all of her fingers simultaneously. We'll at some point see how we can go from a default pose into a resting hand pose or other natural poses using that controller. But if you don't want to use that controller, you can grab a controller for, say, just one finger, and you can move that one finger. You can either constrain the finger to be kind of straight like this, or you could just make it move it free in all sorts of different directions. That's kind of up to you. This is, of course, a IK per finger, so every finger is IK, except the thumb. The thumb is not IK, but it works kind of like IK. The final thing, the finger controllers, each one of them we want to be able to do is just bend on that final, what you call it, joint on the finger. So that can bend forward and back, and every one of her fingers can do that. The wrist is going into a bendy bone in the forearm, so you can kind of see that action going on there. This controller is just for her upper body. We'll keep moving down. So this controller here is moving everything from her hips up simultaneously. So you can kind of pose her, and if you need to move her entire upper body. This bone here is just kind of a tweak for her midriff. It ends up not being used as much as this bone and this red bone, which is also controlling her spine from the bottom. This one is controlling her hips from her hips down. Then we already talked about this bone here. So this bone here is a Dikko concept. It's just the center of gravity. So if you want to rotate her entire rig from her center of gravity, you use that. If you want to rotate her entire rig from her feet, then you use this one down here on the ground. This bone in her hip, like the one in her shoulder, controls the pull target for her knee. So you can use that to, again, if you grab her foot and then that in her hip, use active element rotation, then you can do sort of an FK kind of action from her hip. And then also, if you rotate, say on the Z-axis, her foot stays planted on the ground, but her knee naturally follows where her foot is pointing. That looks a little better than otherwise. Then similarly to her arm, you can grab her foot and then the bone in her knee to get some FK-like action from her knee. That's what that is for. You can control the foot here, but notice that does move the IK all the way up to her hip. But if you just wanted to move her foot only, you can grab that, and then this one in her ankle, and that, again, if you choose active element and rotate it, it just rotates her foot. If you rotate her foot enough, you'll see the back of her leg starts distorting in a strange way. That's the Achilles tendon can't go that far, like that foot is broken, so of course the body's gonna look weird, but we'll get to see how the Achilles tendon is used to make that ankle deform look nice. Of course, we have the foot roll going on here. We have this meta controller, which I use to put her into a high heels versus flat foot position. And so when she is in a high heels position, let's turn off her shoes so we can see her toes get kind of squeezed up like this. But when she's in a flat foot position, her toes are back into a natural look. And so this way we can kind of see from the default pose what it looks like to roll up. So this is not a high heels position because her toes would come out of the heels in this one. But like her hands, there's a meta controller for all of her toes simultaneously, and you can do fun things with that. But also her toes are independently IK rigged, so you can move them all however you want to. Let's put her back into high heels for the rest of this video. Shoes on. I believe we've covered all the major controls, and we'll talk about how the ankles, the knees, the hips, the shoulders, the elbows, a little bit of the wrists, but also the fingers and toes, and the face rig. All these things we're going to cover in much more detail in this video series. If you would like to skip learning and just buy them, look in the description. You can buy these characters and rigs for a very, I think, very reasonable price. All right, with that, I'll go through a couple poses to fill out the time, and then you can wow, that was really crazy. So probably a couple more poses to fill out the time, and then we can visit each other again in the future. This is one of my favorites. Here you can see where the hip rigs are pretty important. One of the things we're going to cover also is gravity. So breasts, when they're large, get pulled down. You'll probably notice her breasts look really flat here, and that's because she is upside down. When she's upside up, they go back to normal. And we're also going to talk about how we can do that with the stomach, so that when she's facing certain ways, her stomach will come out. If she's laying on her back, it would be pulled in. I haven't implemented that in this rig. We will implement that during the course of this series. Let's look at splits. Splits very difficult to get correct, but this hip rig manages it. All right, good luck everyone. See you in the next video.